In the 1990s, was Bonanno crime family boss Joe Massino more powerful than Gambino family boss John Gotti and his son, Junior Gotti? Let's check it out. I'm James Gladwish and welcome to OC Shorts, bringing you detailed historical snapshots of the American Mafia and other organised crime. Feel free to subscribe if you like that sort of thing. Today, we are going to take a quick look at Bonanno family mobster Joe Massino after he became boss of the crime family. It has been said by many sources that during the 1990s, under the leadership of Joe Massino, the Bonanno crime family became more powerful and successful than the Gambino crime family, which had official family boss John Gotti incarcerated and his son Junior Gotti operating as acting boss. I sat down with former Bonanno crime family associate Frank Fiordolino, a man who actually knew Joe Massino, to discuss the former Bonanno family boss. Frank Fiordolino had two uncles in the Bonanno crime family and various other relatives involved in organised crime. He grew up amongst the likes of Cesare Bonventre and Baldo Amato. He would enter a life of crime himself and was associated with Vito Guzzo Jr. and the infamous Giannini crew. Following a murder and murder conspiracy charge, he became a government witness in the early 2000s. He can be seen on the excellent YouTube channel 52 Topics with co-host Brett, which is well worth checking out. The link to this is in the comments below. Frank, in 1991, Rusty Rostelli dies, and despite Joe Massino still being incarcerated for a little bit longer at the time, he was kind of basically named as the successor for that, heading that family. I mean, how old were you around like 91, 92?
I was about 22 years old.
You're 22. I mean, do you remember Massino coming out of prison and becoming the official boss of the family?
Yeah, no, as far as him becoming the official boss, yeah. I mean, I remember going to a Christmas party in 1990 with my uncle and a group of people that were around my uncle, and Sal Vitale was the guy. You know, everybody was giving him an envelope, wishing him a Merry Christmas. This was in Grand Avenue in Mashpit, but it was fully understandable that this is the boss's brother-in-law, you know, and he's a tough guy and whatever guy, you know, he had that aura, but the guy pulling it together is Joe Massino. Now, Joe Massino ends up taking a restaurant up around 95. So in 95, when he takes the restaurant, he takes Casablanca, which was the old Giannini restaurant. And he takes over. So you figure in 95, he's probably off parole. I'm guessing. That's why his workplace is there. He was closing the clubs at the time. He wasn't like what was going on with the social clubs. He felt that they were just indictments ready to happen.
Yeah, I mean, because we're going to talk about his kind of what made him quite successful. I mean, that was one of the things, wasn't it? He thought that they were just like a social clubs, like a magnet for law enforcement.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, of course. But at the same time, what's he do? He opens up a restaurant. He makes his demoted captain, Louis Restivo, the maitre d' in the place, who I've known almost all my life. You got to remember, Casablanca is probably 3 blocks away from where I lived. And I knew a lot of people that even worked in there. And little by little, his business started a little slow. He convinced all his guys to come there and eat there, bring their friends, and it became a big, giant social club. You know, everybody was there, captains, soldiers, and it was growing heat, you know. And that's when we started seeing him more. I would go there and eat sometimes. My relationship with Joe Massino at that point was hello and goodbye. You know, he was 30 years older than me. He was like a god to me. You know, you hear the term from the Bronx Tale, your God upstairs with this guy. That he was our guy. And he was doing so many things. All these families were just freaking collapsing. And I thought at the time, you know, we didn't even have an informant. I'm not an informant, but a main member that flipped at that time. So we had a lot of things going. But you think about it, what was going on was they were focusing on other families. You know, I had the Colombo War. They were shutting them down. You had the look Casey debacle. You had the Gambino family. So it seemed like the Genovese family had it together as well. But they still were arresting the Chin at the time. So he was the only one left. But he was looking very, very powerful at the time. But he
Well,
did change.
I mean, that's it. So, I mean, throughout the 90s, I mean, it's pretty much understood that the the Bonannos had even overtaken the Gambinos, right? And I think it's Genevieve's captain Alan Baldy
Longo.
Longo
Yeah,
is recorded stating he says something like, apart from our family, the Genovese, Joe's family are our only rivals, basically, and Joe being Joe Massino. I mean,
yeah,
that's a hell of a flip around from the issues that you guys had in the Bananas had in like the 80s with the three captains murders, the Donnie Brasco affair. I mean, they'd been kicked off the commission.
yeah.
You
We
know,
put on the shelf.
they were they. I read something the other day where the Chin Gigante took a vote to actually save the Bonanno family at one point because they were concerned about the lack of centralized leadership at the time. Rastelli was in prison.
Right.
I mean, this was in the early 80s, I think this point was, but so yeah, I mean, the turnaround was quite impressive. But when he first came out, obviously he'd been kind of pulling the strings for a long time, even throughout
He
the
was.
80s, so to speak, right? Um, but was the general consensus, yeah, but he's the right guy for the job? No, there was no other mutterings to say,
No, not at all. Not at all. I used to tell this story all the time. We used to go eat there, and they could have gave us shit on a stick, and it was the most delicious thing ever. You know what I mean? And I remember Vito Guzzo go, "Oh, this is on the money." Yeah, I mean, there was nothing, no rambles. He was the guy. He was the man. And not only that, he was killing people while he was in jail. Well,
yeah,
what about Infante, Mauro, Tomasulo? These guys were being killed while Massino was in jail. So
yeah,
it goes to show, and the Zip faction of the Sicilian faction. Here I am using all the derogatory terms on myself, but yeah, that was done, and it just didn't exist anymore. And I'm going to have a show about that myself, about what happened to the Sicilian faction, and a lot of people think that after the pizza connection it was going. No, there were guys who were non-threatening Sicilian guys that were non-threatening to Joe Massino, and they were money guys, so they were allowed to operate.
but you still, yeah, you had obviously George Shasha, George from Canada, still, and you still had
Oh,
those connections up to Montreal, so that you did have that Sicilian links all the way up to Canada.
my bad. Let me go. I'm talking about New York.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
Giorgio was starting little by little obviously annoy Massino, and he couldn't give two shits about Canada. He took him out. This is how ballsy he had gotten. People are like, oh, that could have caused a war. I don't know. He was powerful. He was
yeah.
really powerful.
I mean, was George a popular guy? I mean, what was the kind of the fallout from that? I mean, obviously Montreal
Gentlemen,
couldn't have been too happy, but around New York, I mean, because wasn't it? It was Di Filippo and Johnny
Johnny,
Joe.
they ended up killing him, I think in 97 or 98,
Yeah, 99 might be, but yeah,
99. I remember being in jail with them and together, right when they got indicted on that case.
yeah.
Back to Georgia, he was a gentleman. He was great, but like he must. There's a lot of reasons. People say because he insulted TG. Some people say
Yeah.
because some guy in Canada got killed. No, it was because it was his time to go. He felt threatened one way or the other. Sal Vitale was starting to irritate him. He felt that Sal Vitale, while he was in jail, was rubbing handshaking it down all the way to 101st Avenue with the Gotti crew. And he didn't like that. He goes, "Why are you fraternizing these guys when we have our own guys here?" And they were starting to hear a lot of stories. Tony Green hated fucking Sal Vitale for the way he comported himself when Joe was inside. So it was divide, conquer, eliminate. That's little by little. Joe wanted to run eventually by getting rid of all these guys. He wanted a money operating business. What they're thriving in today, that's what he wanted back then.
Yeah.
Making money guys as kids. It was, and that's what was his downfall in a way.
You You met Massino in prison properly in the end, didn't you? Obviously, you knew him through the hello goodbye from the restaurant and things like
Of
that.
course,
But you
of
actually spent
course.
a bit of time with him when you were in jail, right?
Yes, about a year and a half, co-defendant meetings. It was always the same people. It was me, Danny Magelli, Robert Lino, Willie Raviello. I think Monkey Man sometimes, and he just stopped coming altogether, which was weird. Frank Lino for a second. We always every Monday we'd meet at the MDC, the one where Puff Daddy was at,
Yeah.
and we used to have co-defendant meetings with our lawyers on the bottom floor.
And I mean, what was your opinion of him at this time? Like I said, having witnessed him kind of take over as boss in the '90s and go through, and as you said, was it paranoia in terms of we started clipping people, or but they was kind of always like that, eliminating threats throughout the years?
He was cool about it. I mean, when anybody would mention somebody, like for the Giorgio thing, he blamed it on the Albanians really nonchalantly. Um, the Cesare Bonventre hit, when the paperwork came out on that and Sal was spilling the beans, he just blamed it on Rastelli. He goes, I didn't have nothing to do with that. Matter of fact, he told me himself. He goes, Rastelli wanted to kill Baldo. He did it in front of four of us and looking at me like, hopefully, if he listens, because he's just one of them anyway, looking at me. That's the way I felt. He's just going to go and tell Baldo, which I wouldn't have anyhow. He was eliminating himself from that kind of smoke. But he was the guy who initiated that mostly, and a lot of the other stuff. That's how he was.
Yeah, I mean, you've read his testimony after Massino became an informant himself. I mean, do you think he's lying in a lot of those things? Because he kind of regurgitates those stories as well. He does say the same thing. He says that Rastelli wanted Bonventre dead. For the kind of they've been shaking down. This guy's name escapes me, but yeah, and he even says about Sonny Black's murder. He says that Sonny Black was trying to take over the family. I mean, it was like a month after the Donnie Brasco thing. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I mean, is there half elements of truth in some of the things he's saying, or is he just?
Yes and no. Listen, if Rastelli was on the fence on any of those murders, Joe Massino pushed it through, got him, and threw him up right on the other side of that. He was a manipulator. He was a master manipulator. He figured at one point, once Rastelli's a lot older than him. Once Rastelli gets
Yeah,
older, it's going to be his family to take. But let's get rid of, with Rastelli's help. Let's get rid of these pieces that are in my way. Sonny Black contested him all the way. He was more like than at one time. But with that excuse of bringing Brasco in and fraternizing with Brasco, he used that narrative. Like, how can you believe this guy didn't know this guy was a Fed? Messing around with us. He's got to go. That kind of stuff. And that was his attitude. And I tell everybody too, he was like Jackie Gleason, but with a mean streak.
so obviously having known the man and having watched him as you kind of grow up a bit in terms of Messino, would you, when you look back at it, and the fact that he did after he got convicted, he very quickly turned informant. Were you surprised, or do you think actually that is his nature? He would have had that instinct of.
Yeah. I've said this before as well. I think money made him flip, not jail. They were taking everything away from him. They took and ultimately they were going to take his mother's house. He was an elderly woman,
Yeah.
and at one point he just said, "Fuck this," I ain't doing it. I can't do it. But definitely money. I don't think. And I there was another angle later on I picked up. Who knows if he was afraid they might kill him in there? You got to remember he brought his brother-in-law in that was a correction officer.
Yeah.
Not only that, he was not getting no money anymore. It seemed like Vinny Gorgeous was out there doing whatever he wanted to do. You're like, he ain't coming out anyway, so let me, and and then you have Engocado. He killed his father. Everybody goes, yeah, it's a mob. That shit. No, it does. Grudges. People have grudges. Believe me, especially those kind. Ask Vito Guzzo. You know, um, maybe he was afraid of going to prison. There's a lot of things. The Cesar Bonventre thing came out. Not that I think there was Sicilians in prison that were willing to take him out. I don't think there was many. And if there were, they're like 80 years old. from the old Pizza Connection cases, but even the Canadians,
Yeah.
the Giorgio incident. So if you talk about the witness protection program, and do you need it? Yeah, you need it for people like Joe Massino. Obviously, he's dead, and people like Sal Vitale, because there's people that are very, very, very angry at these guys.
In the comments below, let me know your thoughts on Joe Massino as a boss of a New York crime family. I hope you found that interesting. Thanks for watching.